Hi, Dr. Reagan Robertson, CCO of Productive Dentist Academy here, and I have a question for you. Are you finding it hard to get your team aligned to your vision, but you know you deserve growth just like everybody else? That's why we've created the PDA Productivity Workshop. For nearly 20 years, PDA workshops have helped dentists just like you align their teams, get control of scheduling, and create productive practices that they love walking into every day. Just imagine how you will feel when you know your schedule is productive, your systems are humming, and your team is aligned to your vision. It's simple, but it's not necessarily easy. We can help. Visit productivedentist.com/workshop. That's productivedentist.com/workshop to secure your seats now.
I was just going to say, I think Chris is exactly on. I think, who's going to listen to this right now? Who's listening to us talk? And I think that there's a few kids that I've met with that are coming out of dental school. And I think this is a perfect little snippet podcast for them to listen to understand, okay, what do you at least have to know? Like what's the most basic version of how are you going to get into this game and what kind of a game are you going to play? Right. And you need to have some idea of what game is out there and what's going to be required of you and what do you want to do, right? And I think that Chris is exactly right. I think the majority of the kids coming out of school now are more adept to fall into this DSO line where it's like, hey, I just want this. It was a crazy thing. Growing up, no one ever really took a vacation to Hawaii. It was just the weirdest thing. Like, wow, they must be totally rich, right? And nowadays, kids are like, it's just this thing, right? We travel more. We love life experiences so much more. So I think that they come out and they kind of want the good right off the bat. And that's great, but that's what they value, right? So when they see the ticket from the DSO, it's like, wow, I can do all of this and not have to worry about staff and not have to worry about that.
Welcome to Investment Grade Practices Podcast, where we believe private practice dentists deserve to get the lifestyle today while building an asset for tomorrow. Join your host, Victoria Peterson, to design the practice of your dreams and secure your financial independence. Let's get started.
Welcome back to another edition of Investment Grade Practice. I'm continuing the conversation with Chris Sands, Joanne Miles, and Dr. Daniel Haws. Last episode was so intriguing, and we went into after hours just talking about it even more. So we're going to continue the dialogue of, if you are a mid-career doctor, what are some of the things you can do to maximize the value and maximize your return? And we ended last time on the topic of the $1 Million Associate and what that does. And Chris, you pointed out a lot of great things. It sounds so easy. So we're going to go into the not so easy parts about it. But the rewards are tremendous, right? Multi-doctor practices have lower risk. You don't have one singular point of failure if the owner and high producer go down. You also talked about if you're the owner doctor and you're the top producer, that's the worst place for you to be. You should strive to mentor people to outproduce you and do that. It also, having associates, that's your debt repayment strategy. I just loved that you were saying that. Like, if you've got all those loans, let's get profitable and have the work of the associate take care of that. So I want to pitch the question first to Dr. Haws, because you've been an associate several times before you became an owner. What were some of the questions you had as an associate, or that you hoped would have happened when you went into practice with a solo doctor?
I think some of the questions that I had were, how do I know when I'm ready to buy into a practice, right? Like, when am I going to be ready for this? There's the obvious questions of like, how do I do dentistry, right? And we previously talked in the previous episode there of, mentorship, being so important to an associate and feeling that they're supported at all levels, right? But after that, it becomes like, how do I know I'm ready? When am I ready? What are there numbers that tell me that? Tell me what those numbers are. Is my skill set ready, or am I going to fall on my face? I think those were a lot of the questions. Do I buy the practice? Do I partner? And so And I think all associates nowadays come out with that, except for they have options that I didn't necessarily have with as many DSOs as are out there nowadays that are hiring dentists to come work for you and saying, hey, we're going to pay you this, and we're going to give you this debt repayment, we're going to give you this health insurance and all that stuff. That's a little more available to these young docs coming out with so much debt, and wasn't really as available to someone like me coming out in the era that I did. It was, hey, go try and meet someone and see if they'll let you work for them. And you're going to work and make what you do, right? Off of a commission or whatever. So I think those were some of the heartaches that I had to deal with. So, what's right? Do I go with a DSO, or do I, that's something that gives me more of a set program, or do I learn with a new doc or with a veteran doc? Do I become their associate?
I love it. Well, once again, you've set us up for a great topic. And I think we'll take both sides of the coin. So we'll start with, what are some of the things that associates should look for and expect? And then we'll flip the coin and say, owners, how do you attract and make it attractive? And when would you invite ownership into, or what could contracts look like? So Chris, you just look like you're chomping at the bit to jump in here.
Well, one of the questions he also asked was, that question of how do I know when I'm ready to buy in? First of all, I think nowhere else but dentistry is it that in the first interview, that question gets asked by candidates.
Right.
So what's the path to partnership? And you wouldn't go, working for a big corporate company. Yeah. A law firm, and ask, what's that path?
Google day one. When do I take over?
And I think as a young doctor, it should be your goal to prove yourself, and to prove to yourself that I'm going to go back to the $1 million. If you can produce $1 million for somebody else, then you can carry the weight of practice ownership by yourself. Because once you buy in, or once you buy your own practice, it's your back against the wall. It's you that's make or break. So you have to make things happen. So now in today's kind of dental marketplace, I think that there is a lot less hands-on clinically in dental school. They are very more restrictive in what they're actually getting to do. So they come out not only slow, because maybe a crown prep in dental school takes 3 hours and you want to get it down to 45 minutes, but they come out just very inept to what maybe you were accustomed to in your era coming out having done in dental school. So there's this learning curve. And if they did not do a GPR or AEGD, I think today's general dentist is desired by the patient, primarily the 30 to 55-year-old female, I think, desired to be the super dentist and do all things under one roof. I think implants is common nomenclature for people these days. Root canals, people don't know what an endodontist is. They think that's a dinosaur. They expect that every dentist does root canals. Come on, that's been around for a while. And pulling wisdom teeth. Hey, everybody has wisdom teeth. You're saying you can't pull my wisdom teeth? What's an oral surgeon? What's wrong with me, doc? Then they start to second guess. Are you a good enough dentist for them? So I think it does take time for a new practicing doctor, an associate, to build up their clinical skill set. And then their confidence. The confidence is a big piece. I think confidence has gone way down just generationally. There's a lot of self-doubt and anxiety. And I think that they've got to come in and be super confident in who they're talking to and how they're diagnosing and their ability to deliver that care. I'll pause there. I'm trying to think what the other question you asked.
I think that's really great, though, that how do you know as an associate when is the right time, and having your own internal performance metrics? You laid out quite a few.
I can speak financially to it. If you're gonna finance, two things. Number one, if you're gonna partially buy in, you're gonna take out a loan personally, and that's gonna be your personal after-tax loan payment. So if you buy in for half the practice, you figure out what your loan payment's gonna be. Will you be making more money immediately, net? Likely not. So you got to know that. Number two, liquidity wise, banks don't require, they're not going to take it from you, but they want to see that you're a saver. And for whatever reason, they've all told me that the magic number is whatever loan amount you're going to ask for, they'd like to see that you have 7% of that number liquid. Okay. So if you are asking for $1 million, they'd like to see that you have $70,000 cash. And they can't, they don't really count your retirement accounts or anything like that. So, um, I just think that
That's
you need,
actually not bad. That's less than a home down payment,
right.
right?
Yeah. They're not going to
So,
take it from you. They're just going to require that you have it.
all right. So give us the 1, 2, 3 of preparing. So, right, there's 3 ways to own a practice. You can de novo, you can scratch start, right? So you got to go and get working lines of credit, and that'll be one topic. The other is go buy out the practice completely or partner in at some percentage. Can you give us, because all 3 of those are different, right? With the bank requirements.
Yeah. If you do a startup, those are the highest risk. You're going to have some sort of tenant improvement loan because you have to install the plumbing into whatever space that you're in. You're going to have an equipment loan, and then you're going to have a working capital loan or line of credit. And it's not going to be huge in most cases. You might be if you get 100,000 working capital to get started. When it comes to buying in or selling or buying the entire practice, the valuation and how much the banks will lend are completely dependent on the financials of the business. So they're going to look at the last 3 years of revenues or collections. They're going to look at the bottom line profit, and they're going to take that profit and say, here's a rule of thumb. If you're going to take a loan, the payment is typically about $7,000 per million. Okay. So if you take $500,000, it might be $3,500 a month. If you take $1 million, $7,000 a month. And they're going to see, does the practice show at least that much in cash flow at the bottom line in profit? So $7,000 a month is $84,000 a year. At minimum, it's got to have that just to cover that loan, right? But buying in is not difficult. I think the easiest is buying the practice 100%, an existing practice 100%. I would say in order of ease, it's buying a practice outright, then buying into the practice is it's easy to get accomplished in finance. I just think it's sometimes hard for that partner to understand that they got to make that payment themselves personally, just like their student loans. And then the startup is just, hopefully you have some cash reserves saved up. Hopefully maybe you're moonlighting in another practice part-time to get things going. But I do see the future in dental lending and private practice. I see the future being more heavily weighted in startups because as the consolidation happens and DSOs buy these practices, there might be less private practices to purchase. So that the true, and I think that, the entrepreneurial dentist is becoming more and more rare out of dental school. I would say that most students and residents do not want to own. The majority do not. The majority are female. The majority almost don't even want to work 4 days a week. They want to work 3 days a week. And the majority do not want to own. That's for a multitude of reasons. I think that there's the student loan crisis that you mentioned, and they're having heavily weighted there. They're scared. They know they got to cover that payment, so they'll take the guarantee from a DSO. And I think that there's just generationally now this work-life balance desire where they want the life part first. I want my lifestyle and I want to be able to travel and have flexibility more than wanting to work. So working to live, not living to work.
I love all of that. And I'm going to be a proponent of please become an entrepreneur. Please own your own stuff.
Yes.
Right. So the world is out there discouraging you. DSOs own the dental school. Medicaid corporations own the dental schools. And the narrative is very, very swayed in that direction. Daniel, jump in here.
I was just going to say, I think Chris is exactly on. I think, who's going to listen to this right now? Who's listening to us talk? And I think that there's a few kids that I've met with that are coming out of dental school. And I think this is a perfect little snippet podcast for them to listen to understand, okay, what do you at least have to know? Like what's the most basic version of how are you going to get into this game and what kind of a game are you going to play? Right. And you need to have some idea of what game is out there and what's going to be required of you and what do you want to do, right? And I think that Chris is exactly right. I think the majority of the kids coming out of school now are more adept to fall into this DSO line where it's like, you know, hey, I just want this. I mean, it was a crazy thing growing up. No one ever really took a vacation to Hawaii. It was just the weirdest thing. Like, wow, they must be totally rich, right? When nowadays, I mean, kids are like, it's just this thing, right? We travel more. We love life experiences so much more. So I think that they come out and they kind of want the good right off the bat. And that's great, but that's what they value, right? So when they see the ticket from the DSO, it's like, wow, I can do all of this and not have to worry about staff and not have to worry about that. So that's really kind of the ticket. However, the flip side of that is I have never met such entrepreneurial people in my life as I have recently from some of these dentists coming out.
Yeah.
They're in their second of 4 years and they're meeting with me and they're talking about opportunities. They're talking about business. How did they know this? They don't even teach this in dental school. But look at the information. Yeah, but that's just it. Is Victoria's out there, investment grade practices is out there, PDA is out there, and these guys have YouTube as well and podcasts. I mean, that's how I got into this, right? Productive Dentist Academy podcast. They have access to this stuff. I mean, just last workshop, Victoria, we were at the workshop and there were dental students in the workshop, and you're like, wow. And everybody's sitting there and we're just applauding, like, congrats, guys. You figured out how to be in the game, even when you don't necessarily understand. So these kids are coming out and they're ready to play even before they know how to use their hands very well. And I love that side of it. And it's just, I think for them, this podcast they're gonna eat it up and say like, hey, what do I need? What's this working capital? What does that really mean? Well, working capital is what you're going to need to be able to pay, you know, the marketing, pay the rent, pay all that stuff when nobody's coming to see you yet because you just opened your doors. And just because you opened your doors and sent out flyers doesn't mean people are going to come in right away. Right?
No, I tell you, I love your prediction, Chris. And here's my prediction. We may have fewer as an aggregate from the class, right? So when Bruce graduated, it was just expected. 95% of you are going to go into private practice. 5% will go in the military, or, you know, some percentage like that. You went in the military or you private practice, and you hung out a shingle. That's what you did in the 70s and 80s. You hung out the shingle. And then the 80s, interest rates went really high. People went bankrupt. And then the whole concept of associateship was born. That didn't even start coming around until the 90s. It's a very new thing, mostly because doctors are very autonomous. They barely get along with themselves, much less someone else. They're just not designed to play well with others. You know, you were particularly selected for your traits of OCD and high perfection, right? So all of us in dentistry, we've all got those characteristics. So you're like, all right, you're high OCD, you're ADHD, you're a perfectionist. And now I want you to basically marry someone in your work life. And then it implodes and you have 13 associates in 5 years, right? So it's just like hard. It's not a good idea on any level. And yet I think those who pull it off contribute more to the world and create more life balance and create the wealth. There's really not going to be a lot of ways to overcome your student debt is, in my mind, hyperinflated for the agenda. And the agenda is white collar slavery. So if you have $500,000 in debt and somebody scares the shit out of you, then you will go and take a job that pays you $200,000 guaranteed, versus believing podcasts that say, no, as a solopreneur, you can take home $500,000, $600,000. And you're like, no way, you're from a foreign planet, but it's true. Chris, I love that there's a real nugget here in distinction between, because I think a lot of people would say, gosh, scratch start sounds really hard. I don't know anything about construction. I don't know anything about that. Buying 100% sounds really risky because then it's all on me. So I'm going to dabble and do this buy in, buy out. But go back to the debt structure, that after-tax personal loan versus pre-tax business loan. What's the net on that? Say it's $1 million practice.
Just point of clarification. What do you mean by net?
Well, like
You're talking Chris's language here. He's getting technical.
What's the difference in my my personal take home, right? Because I got to pay one loan after my taxes. I get to pay the other loan before.
I'll put it this way. You know, when you buy a practice outright and you take that loan is inside your business, and you're paying that loan with your business revenues, your business cash flows. And but in all cases, people don't realize this, all debt is paid off with after-tax dollars. All debt is paid off with after-tax dollars. The only thing you get to deduct is interest. Okay. And you get depreciation on things like equipment, assets, and goodwill over time. But the debt payment itself, technically, is all, the principal portion is all paid off with after-tax dollars. So it's just easier when it's inside the business. You're using the business money. It's always easier to write a business check. You're using the business money to make the loan payment. But when you buy in partially, you know, when you buy in, you take a loan out, that loan is your personal loan to bring cash to the table to buy in. That cash is then given to those existing partner or partners, and they're going to be required typically by their debt covenants to pay off their debts with any kind of portion sale anyway. But their debts are not your debts when you buy in that portion. Your debt is that personal loan you took out to buy in. So it just definitely, you know, hurts more. It feels like it hurts more when you have to take the money home, withhold taxes, you know, set aside taxes, and then you've got to make that loan payment personally when you are a 30% partner or 50% partner. You know, that is just your personal loan for the buy-in. If later on down the road you buy out the remaining partner in full, the remaining interest, then all of those loans can be combined and put inside the business for you, and you'd pay it with the business cash flow. So, you know, I like to say that debt has the byproduct is phantom tax. When it's in the business owner doesn't even realize that when the payment is $5,000, the cash flow required for that debt is not only the $5,000. It's the $5,000. Let's say that the principal portion is $3,000. You owe 40% tax on that $3,000. That's $1,200. So the cash flow required for that $5,000 a month loan is really about $6,200 a month. And you don't pay it that way. Nobody does. But that's where people sometimes are like, how come I owe this in tax? It's not in my bank account. I didn't take it home. A lot of times that's as a result of there being a lot of debt. You just
solved the biggest Scooby-Doo mystery of finance ever.
Yes.
Like
I get told that a lot.
I want to get into the mystery van and get Thelma and Louise on that one again. So yes. Oh, I don't know about the three of you, but I want to continue doing podcasts with the three of us. On this one, I'm going to round it out, going back to Joanne. This was such great stuff. I know we got 5,000 other things we can say. Joanne, I'm a young doctor. I know what I'm looking for as an associate. I want to hit my milestones of $83,000 a month. I'm going to get in there. I'm going to make sure my one chair is producing $40,000 so I can get that second chair and become the producer and all of those things. Now I'm thinking about buying in, and I'm going to be a partner. And one of the things that you and I talk about a lot at Productive Dentist Academy is sitting down and taking the time to create a memorandum of understanding, an MOU. Who does what? Now, this isn't about voting rights and things like that. It's about skill sets and talent. So talk about some of the really cool things you can do to set a partnership or an associateship up for success.
Yeah. And, you know, a lot of it is you kind of see, I unfortunately get to see all the errors along the way. Know to do the other way. But yes, I think it's almost like it's a business contract. It's a marriage contract in a sense. There's you have to have an understanding of how are we entering into this agreement, and that agreement also has to have some kind of a clause of how we would exit this agreement.
You got to have the prenup.
You got to have the prenup. Yes. So those are like the two big pillars, and then there's all this stuff in between. That's the life, right? And you want to try to make it, as far as running the business, there needs to be a co-leadership. There has to be, it's a mom and dad. And then your team is the children, and you can't be divided, and so there has to be agreements along the way of how are we going to lead this team? Who's more the extrovert and is better at building relationships with the team? Maybe they take more of the lead, and then the other person is more the administrator and is great at just dealing with a lot of the
bookkeeping and equipment and lab vendors and
right, and who's really great at mentoring versus who has like hardly a fuse of patience left in them. So it can be many things like that. It's who's going to be on call and when. They don't think about this. It's like, well, I always want to take Christmas off. Or, well, my kids, you don't have kids right now. Maybe someone's younger, and I have kids. So I'm always going to take spring break off. But then all of a sudden, one day, that person now has children. There has to be some compromise in there. These are the things that unfortunately don't get discussed early in the stages. It's that can trip you up. And then I'm going to say that there's these core values and core beliefs that have to be discussed. If you cannot see eye to eye on how you're going to conduct yourself as a human being, and there are some true conflicts of what one person might think is not a proper way to conduct yourself with your team, and the other person is a little bit more loosey-goosey, that's another area. And when you are in a partnership, you are both at risk. And so it's very important that you talk about the risk management side of things and what your deal breakers are. I have seen situations where one partner had, we'll just say a lot of integrity in areas and the other one did not, and got caught with the hand in the cookie jar. But it came down, it trickled down into the team, and it could have been an enormous disrupt for the business. So there's a lot.
And it doesn't even have to be, I love what you're pointing out, like the big value, life value, integrity pieces there, but it's even the focus, right?
Yeah.
And you and I were talking about this the other day of, do you believe in sharing profits with the team? That can be a very polarizing conversation. You're like, well, of course we have an incentive plan for our team. What do you mean that you don't agree with that right now? So we've got a very detailed document that we walk doctors through as personal counselors to, each person fills it out on their own by themselves, and then they send it to Joanne, and she looks at it and kind of puts it and collates it into one document and says, here's where we've got some good alignment. Here's where we've got some gaps. Here's an area that we really might want to look for some of these deal breakers, and somebody's going to have to give. It takes time. And it's unfortunate that we move at such a pace that we don't always take that time. Not doing these things to set yourself up for success not only causes heartache and stomach lining, costs you a lot at the bank account too.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, you can't enumerate every detail. You can't enumerate the spring break thing that someone's going to have. But when I do have kids and this is going to happen, there's not enough pieces of paper out there. I think the reality of it is do you get along? And what do they say? The best indicator for a successful marriage is probably going to be the best indicator for also a partnership or something like that is, how do you communicate when you disagree?
Yep.
And what is your ability to, are you bullies? Are you mean?
Yep.
Are you angry? Do you hold grudges for the rest of the week? Well, goodness, no staff's going to want to be involved with that,
No.
or are you able to work through that together? I think that for me is key. Of course, so many of those things, I was like, yes, have all those, make sure those are all signed and dotted and everything.
Thank you, all three. These last two episodes have absolutely been some of the most fun episodes I've recorded over the last couple of years. I hope that you come back and we play again together sometime.
Thanks. I look forward to it.
Fun.
Chris, if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
You can check out our website at profi2020.com, profi2020.com. And we're on basically all forms of social media. We take messages all the time through those. So please feel free to look us up, give us a follow.
I love it. Joanne, of course, you're here at Productive Dentist Academy, but if anybody wants to reach out, what's the best way for them to do that?
It would be via email at Joanne, Joanne, Miles, Miles, at productivedentist.com.
I love it. And Dr. Daniel, if your hundreds and hundreds of new young dentist fans want to get a hold of you and send you gift baskets,
Right.
do you have a way for them to reach out?
Yeah, just danhaws@gmail.com. Yeah.
Love it. I love it. Thank you all for being here today.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Investment Grade Practices Podcast. If you find value in this episode, help us spread the word by passing it along to a dental friend, subscribe, and give us a like on iTunes or Spotify. Learn more about building your investment grade practice at productivedentist.com today.